Ambition.
Oh, wow. Take three, guys. Take three.
Take three or 10. No, just three. Welcome back, guys. This is Tiffany.
And Alex.
Today we have Rebecca Ryell, and she's a GP, a family travel coach, and a mom of three who's been turning bold travel dreams into reality for families. Rebecca spent 16 years proving that motherhood doesn't mean your adventures have to end, they just get better. And with our coaching program, Adventure Together, she helps families to overcome fear, step outside of their comfort zone, and create unforgettable experiences that strengthen connection and build resilient kids. Rebecca believes travel can be transformational and doable, even with school jobs and daily life to juggle. Welcome to my mission for the third time, Rebecca.
Hello, hi.
She's like,
No.
Oh.
Yeah, it wouldn't
And
be the same without a few bits of technical mayhem, child-related.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
we are used to the technical mayhem, but thanks for sticking with us through 3 attempts to start recording there. Yeah, a little bit of a sneak peek behind
Yes.
the curtain there.
Chaos.
No, I
These
think
professional
that's
podcasters.
very modest of you to try and say it was your fault when it was clearly my internet.
It's
But
fine.
perhaps your podcast being so far-reaching and successful, it just kind of crashed it when my home computer tried to.
There you go. I like that.
Yeah, we'll take that explanation. Well,
Exactly.
welcome anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I think I was saying for the third time that during the intro you said something that stuck with me. This idea that why breastfeed from your house when you can do it from a bench in California, and I think it really summarizes you and your mindset to motherhood and travel. So yeah, took us back to that moment where you thought, yep, I'd rather make that up. So really cool.
Yeah, I'm not sort of pretending to be any kind of crazy maverick. Everything in my life has happened mostly by accident.
Okay.
Especially being allowed to travel in my maternity leave. That was definitely in alignment. Like I've explained, my husband and I, we always loved to travel, and we sort of met through a shared love of it, really. But we weren't really sure how it was going to pan out after we had children. We'd heard people say things like, oh, the children just come into your family and you have to show them how your family does it. And I thought, yeah, that sounds good. But, working as a GP, you can see that it doesn't always pan out like that. And with all the best intentions, some people really change through the process of having a baby, and what they want to do changes and all of the rest of it. But I was very lucky. I had a nice, easy pregnancy and easy childbirth, and then my husband got made redundant during my maternity leave, which was brilliant timing, actually, because although it was a bit stressful, we didn't have much money, we were able to just be together like a little unit, and we gained confidence quite quickly. We liked surfing, so we used to go off for day trips, and my oldest was quite quickly adapted to whatever it was we were doing. And yeah, it was really nice. And I think that then became a synonymous with me, that whole concept of breastfeeding whilst looking at something beautiful or in a nice spot, or even just chatting to a stranger who chooses to come and sit on the bench by you. Or I think it was, for me, going to be important by the time I had my second baby, that I wasn't just sat at home in my own four walls. And my second child was born in January, so for me that's always a bit of a dodgy time of year because I hate this sort of grey and the rain. And I thought, I'm not sure how this is going to pan out. So we planned on my second to go on a big adventure, and we managed to do that. And then by the third, well, I almost wanted a third baby just so I could go on another big adventure. And I think I would have kept going, having more and more babies, if my husband had been willing to let that happen. But he said it's not a particularly good reason to have another baby. So we then just started to go on sort of longer sabbaticals, ask for bigger patches of time off work. And yeah, it's kind of like an itch. It kind of comes every 2 or 3 years, this need to break routine, to feel alive and spontaneous again, and to see new places and be influenced by new cultures. And so it's not always a comfortable feeling when it starts rising. You think, oh, how am I going to make this work? It's terrible timing. And what are the children doing in school? And oh, that's not going to work. But I think it is something now which we've learnt to really see the benefits of. So we do try and work through all of those barriers.
I mean, what struck me there, it's so interesting. You can hear the passion in your voice as you're talking. But what really struck me as interesting was, saying my husband was made redundant, and that was lucky, because that is not how most people would look at that when their husband is made redundant when they're on maternity leave. And I think that you've got a really positive and pragmatic approach to things, that you could see the benefits in that actually allowed you to have time together.
Yeah, it's 16 years ago now, so it's very easy retrospectively, isn't it? I mean, at the time, there was definitely an element of, sort of panic, but it was what it was, and there's only so many hours a day you can sit and thrash out job application forms. And, totally selfishly, as a new mum, I was just delighted to have him around. And I've got some funny photos of that first few months with our new baby, where he's often stood in a wetsuit changing the baby on one of those little change tables. And I think, when you're a first time breastfeeding mum, you sit down to feed, and there's some sort of, I don't know, biomedical feedback system kicks in, and you don't think about it until the baby latches on. But the minute they do, and you're sat down comfortably with all your pillows, and you think, I'm really thirsty. I'm really, really thirsty. And then if you're on your own in the house, I don't know, you're supposed to sort of disrupt the whole scenario, get up, go and get a drink. Whereas I was just able to call my husband, say, I need a drink. And he'd always say, well, why didn't you think about that before? I think, well, I didn't. It only happens once you start. So, and I think that's kind of true of a lot of things that carry on through parenting. It's only when you get to the pub, you think, oh, I should have bought some wet wipes, or, I'm terrible for, I've never been particularly good in my own life at planning, organisation, but when I had children, it sort of got amplified, and I was always the one in the mothers group who hadn't remembered to bring, any of the stuff that you're supposed to have. But I think being a GP, it does allow me to get away with that a little bit more. People make, assumptions that I know what I'm doing, and so I can wing it a bit.
I love that.
That's a refreshing take on the privileges that being a GP allows you. So, where did you go to on your first trip? What was your first trip that you did? You had
so child? With my first, we were just going around in the UK in our camper van, and that
so
kind of thing.
Up a bit.
So we did go abroad. We went to France, but it wasn't anywhere particularly far flung. But we were just sort of learning about exactly those things, like what kind of stuff. They tell you need loads of stuff when you have a baby. And I was like, actually, you don't need any of this stuff. And babies can sleep in a drawer with a few blankets. And they, everything was, we just kind of gained our feet in terms of us not really needing to have loads of stuff. But by my second, as I say, we'd planned the trip. So we went to the States, and we had a 90-day visa, and we got a kind of camper van, like a big Winnebago style RV, and we picked it up in San Francisco. We drove all the way down Highway 1 to San Diego, and then across the bottom through mainly through Texas, actually, which is a real surprise of a state, absolutely brilliant. And then through the Florida Panhandle. We went to New Orleans Jazz Festival, actually, when we were in Louisiana. Just by chance, it happened to be on when we got there. That was brilliant. And then kind of went up the coast, up to Charlestown and Georgia, and then back across. And on the way back across, there was a big kind of risk of hurricanes, and we kind of had to get out of the camper van one night in Oklahoma City. We went all the way back through Route 66 and Las Vegas and the Grand Canyon, and then ended up just with like 24 hours to spare back in San Francisco to get our flight back. But the camper van trip was great with the newborn because wherever we were, and we were always with the van more or less, we had everything we needed, so we could make my 3-4-year-old then like pasta at the drop of a hat, or open a can of beans, and we had all the nappies, or all the wet wipes, or for someone like me who never remembers to take anything out with them, I just always had everything I needed right there. And it was nice for the children to always have the same bed every night, so they didn't have that whole kind of getting used to a new environment. And it allowed my husband and I to be able to I don't know, just like really feel like we were being spontaneous, because we could make up where we felt like driving to the next day. We'd be driving along and we'd see a sign for something interesting, and we'd pull off and check it out. And because I think when you have newborn babies, your life becomes a bit of a weird sort of, it's a bit like working night shifts as a doctor. It's not really like things stop during the night, during the day. And sometimes you are wide awake at 4 o'clock in the morning. You think, well, it's a really good time for us to, get 3 hours driving under our belts, and then we'll spend the whole day somewhere when we get somewhere. So I found it really worked well with a newborn. I mean, now I've got older children. I do advocate to anyone to consider traveling with a newborn, because they're never actually more portable or easy. And they certainly don't give you their 2 pence worth about whether the place you're going is good or boring, or, they're 100% up for it, babies.
I love the fact that what you said about the drawer. They can fit in a drawer.
And I was just going to say, that's what some of our friends said when I had a baby during COVID, and I had a baby that had health problems. So travel was a little bit off the cards for us for a while. Yeah. But we had friends who had their kids when they were, in their 20s. And they used to say to us, oh, well, the bit where they're a baby, that's a great time to travel, because, they sleep a lot. You can, they're portable, like you said. They don't have opinions. And that bit's easier before they become toddlers. And then they're like into everything and running around, and you need to have your eyes on them all the time.
I mean, I would say there's perfect places to travel with children of all ages. I think the toddler age is good to go to countries that have a really high tolerance for little children, and lots of big open spaces. Lots of countries, they love children. Sri Lanka, Thailand spring to mind, but, great places to go with that really tricky ambulant child, because lots of people will help you, and they're just more geared up for that, really. But again, I think really what I've realized through helping lots of other families over the years is it's all about you as the parent being happy. So I don't try and make people go traveling if they don't love it, and I don't try and say that that's the only way to have a good bringing up of a child. I mean, plenty of children grow up very brilliantly without ever having gone anywhere. So it's more about the mindset, really. And I think the people that I really enjoy helping are the parents who've just always really wanted to go traveling, or have done a lot of it and have stopped since they've had children, because like a lot of things that are talked about on your show, we're quite influenced by the world around us, what people tell us. And when we're new parents, we just desperately want what's best for our children. And we don't really want to do anything too outside the box that might put them at risk, or might be detrimental to them in some ways. And as they get older, as parents, we feel apprehensive about badly affecting their education, or just doing anything that might put them at risk, or and so I think that can be a barrier for people. And there's lots of other things. I mean, people worry hugely about how to get time off work. They worry a lot about how much it's going to cost, because it can be really difficult to have any idea of budget before you start off. What to do with all of your home responsibilities, if you've got grandparents, or pets, or just a lovely garden. People will worry about leaving all of that behind. And that can be the case whether you go for 3 weeks or 3 months. So that's where I really enjoy helping people, is just essentially saying, look, it can be done, and there are ways around it if you want it to happen. Not you should do it, and if you don't do it, your life's not complete.
I love that. I love that take, Rebecca. I think that's exactly what it is. I think sometimes the advice comes across as, oh, if you're not traveling, you're missing out, or you're depriving your children. But I don't think traveling should be imposed on parents. But you said something which I think really sums it up, especially with you. This idea that you travel because it's what you enjoy doing. This idea of, I don't know, like planning being a parent and that whole experience of a family in terms of not just for the children, but taking your and your husband's interest and passions into consideration. Because I think we spoke about how motherhood can feel very kind of like sacrificial all for the children. You know, we give ourselves to children, we give up our career for the children, which is great. But can we actually inject a little bit of ourselves into the experience? So I think from how we're talking to you, I can already tell it's just a passion for you and what you love doing.
Yeah, and if you as a parent would just hate to take your
Travel.
child overseas, or I mean, it's not even about overseas really. What I try and help with is more about this mindset of
Okay.
rolling with the punches, and being able to see the benefits that come when things don't go to plan, and how that can help children learn really important life skills. But it's also about that being really present with your children, which for me comes when I'm away. And that's partly because I'm not very good at stopping and relaxing when I'm at home. So I'm working on that, because that's where we spend most of our lives. But I know as soon as I get on that, gate walkway, as soon as I'm off on an adventure, my shoulders drop and I just feel much more alive and in the moment, and able to show the children things that I don't see in day to day life when I'm just busy driving them around and thinking about the next thing for tea. And so, if you're not somebody that feels like that when you travel, if you feel worried all the time, then I don't think it's necessarily a good idea. But we can help. I have talked to people who but perhaps haven't done things at all for a long time and feel very like worried about it. And I say, well, what's the most important thing? What do you want to really get out of it? And then we sort of build on it, really slowly, increasing the steps till they're more able to go off and do their dream, usually without a huge amount of help. It's just getting back into the swing of something that feels worrying. And a lot of my clients have got children who've got additional needs, or children who perhaps have got health problems, and they need to know that they will, for example, be able to buy gluten-free food in Costa Rica. Or one of my families has gone to Sri Lanka with a bad allergy and needed a Sri Lankan written document to show in restaurants and cafes to make sure that, that sort of thing, the
Okay.
practical tips that can get you over the fears, really. And then, I think, as I say, for if you're a mum who knows that you light up a bit when you're on an adventure, then it can be great. But if we're not happy as parents, then I don't think our children are ever happy. And I think we should be better at prioritizing the things that make us happy, because happy mum, happy baby most of the time.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And I think I'm just curious to kind of delve into how you make it happen practically, because obviously you've got kids in schools, you're a GP, quite a responsible job. How have you been able to make that work to be able to go off and do like extended periods of travel? Because there must be people listening thinking like, oh, well, that's all right, but I've got a job, and how do I fit it in? So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's definitely not easy. So I sometimes, I am, very lucky, I know, but I will sometimes have a reaction when people say, "Oh, you're so lucky, doing this traveling," because I find myself saying, "Well, actually, it's not luck. It's blooming difficult to sort it out, and it takes months of psyching yourself up to ask your colleagues about taking some time off, and asking the school about taking the children out, and there is lots of things, lots of like hurdles to overcome." And I think that's why more people don't do it, because it's very easy to say, "Oh, I would have loved to have done that, but I've never done it because X, Y, and Z." so like I say, I was lucky to start with because I had a few things that went my way that gave me early confidence. And by my third child, we went on this amazing round the world trip, and we really went for it. But since then, the trips that we've done with the young children, they've been typically 2 months to 3 months. So I'm sort of tagging on 2 to 6 weeks onto the school holidays, usually the big one in the summer. And I've got really lovely partners who I work with. And, we've all been through some quite tough stuff over the last few years. I mean, general practice is under huge strain, and we've all got young kids. And COVID was
Just
really
going to say a little thing called COVID.
yeah. So I think we've all valued looking after each other. It's in our own best interest to make sure that we all keep working and keep together. And I just asked them if it would be all right. And they know that it's important to me and that it lights me up and that it refuels me and it prevents burnout. So they were like, yeah, go for it. And I took unpaid leave. On one of the occasions, a couple of the others I've just saved up leave. I think you can do loads in 3 weeks. Even if you get round to saying to work, I'm going to go for just 3 weeks in a row as opposed to 1 week here, 1 week there. Again, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying there's any workplace that's going to openly armed say, yeah, great. Obviously people find that challenging, but it's not impossible. And I think it gives so much benefit, and it's so rejuvenating for any worker to unplug just for 3 weeks. Because when we go on holiday, typically, and we're about to go on a 10-day holiday, I know it will take me a good few days to sort of come down and wind down and get into the holiday mode. And then it's over before you know it and you're home again, isn't it? So I think just giving yourself just that little bit more time so that you can also allow yourself that, what I think is one of the best bits of travel, which is that spontaneity and that ability to go somewhere without a plan. So you can meet somebody and they can say, oh, you should come and stay with my family. We live up in the hills. You can live and work on the farm with us. And you say, yeah, cool. I've got like a few days. Let's come and do that. And things can open up in a way that they can't when you've had to plan everything really carefully. And perhaps with children, one of the biggest lessons I've learned is the pace is totally different. They get tired and they get ill, and you need to be able to say, well, let's not bust a gut to go there next week. Let's just chill here. Everyone's happy. And then we can make the move when everyone's got a bit more energy, or perhaps when the monsoon's passed, or it just makes it a lot less stressful when you've got time on your hands. And interestingly, it doesn't really increase the cost. I mean, yes, you've got your lost earnings at home if you haven't been able to accrue annual leave, but the biggest cost always is getting there. Most of the places we go are places where it's really budget to be there, and staying a few extra nights in a place, they often don't charge a huge amount more than they would for one night. It's particularly if you're ready to like roll your sleeves up and volunteer, and and I like that kind of element of traveling as well, sort of learning a bit how the locals live and trying to kind of get a feel for a place rather than just passing through on your own terms.
I love what you said there about it not being luck. This idea that you do pay the price to live in this way that you want, because I think sometimes people are tied to this kind of like idea that I don't know, like it feels because to you it's authentic because it's genuinely how you want to live. It sounds like you then organize your life around it, and that's how you make it happen. And I think I really like that because to me it sounds like you're very intentional, which I think oftentimes in life, whichever path we want to go on, as long as we're intentional, I think that's how we can sort of own our journey. Because I certainly have the traveling bug. Traveling for me, it's important for me and the children, just because number one, I didn't really travel I didn't travel as a child. The first trip I did was literally from Nigeria to UK when we when we moved here, and then I traveled the next time when I was 21. I was old enough to go to like Spain. So for me, the travel. And when I eventually started traveling, I just saw so many benefits in terms of, like you said, this the how just the things you see, the people you meet, how novel they are. I really liked that. And I love this idea that there's so much experiences beyond us and our perspectives and how we see the world. And I think when you travel, you certainly get that. And for me personally, I want to travel now with the children just because I want to give them that early on. But also, I know that when we spoke, you said something about, like, I think the resilience you build towards your intentionality based on the adversity that you've been through. So I'd love to tap into that. Not for you to kind of, go into too much detail if you don't want
No,
to.
no, no, I'm totally
Um,
happy. I mean, it's
yeah.
relatively recent
Okay.
drama in our lives, but
Okay.
it's what got me into the travel coaching,
Mm,
really.
okay.
I mean, I'd started to think about it a bit beforehand. I've got this wonderful friend, Jo Watkins, who does travel coaching for, sorry, she does coaching for doctors or healthcare professionals of all kinds who want to start business, like entrepreneurial advice. Because as healthcare professionals, we often don't have any experience at all in business. And as wanting to support her, really, I joined her group, and I'd been doing it for a while when someone said, "Well, what about you? What do you do?" And I thought, "Oh, I don't really do anything." But they said, what lights you up? What do people ask you about? What do people come to you for advice? And I said, well, they always come to me for advice about taking kids backpacking and traveling because that's what I love. And so the group sort of said, well, why don't you build a business around that? And I just got going on the business, and I was full of excitement for it when we went on a trip to Central America. And while we were there, my middle son got poorly, and we had to take him to hospital. And he recovered from it quite quickly, really, but he had a pain in his leg, and it passed. And we didn't really ever get to the bottom of it. But when we came back to the UK, it was bad again. So I sort of very reluctantly, classic kind of doctor, we're always terrible at looking after our own children. But I took him to the GP, and the GP sent us to the hospital. We had an x-ray, and then we just had an absolutely terrible evening where they called us into a big room with a box of tissues and told us that he got cancer in his leg, and it was big, and there was a possibility he was going to lose his leg. He asked them, will I die? He was 10 at the time, and they said
Good
maybe.
grief.
So we had 4 months then of uncertainty. We realised fairly early on that it was possibly not that, and possibly
Okay.
I still think maybe caused by a stingray that he stood on when we were in Central America, getting somehow infection into the bloodstream. Anyway, the long and short of it was, I had time off work for the first time in a very long time, and during that time, I also lost my best friend to bowel cancer. My friend who I'd first gone travelling with when we were 18 together, and she left a doting, amazing husband and 3 young children, and it was just a really tough time. And I took time, as I say, off work. I reflected. I went on an amazing extreme medicine course in Namibia, where I'd been lucky enough to live a bit when I was a child, which was about how to sort of make safe AK-47s and deal with gunshot wounds. But it was a bit of a midlife crisis retrospectively. But I was just reassessing. And for me, when I go traveling, in fact, this is what's happened to my husband every time we've been away. You sit around the campfires and your brain is just freer, and you just look at life in a slightly different way, with the ability to think about what you really want from it. A bit like looking back on it and thinking, did it do what I wanted from it? And I think it's really important to do that with children, because they grow up so fast. And I can say that now, mine are 16, 12 and 9. I don't know where the years have gone. And I'm so grateful for every time I've taken my foot off the pedal and just been able to stop and be in the moment. Like I say, that doesn't have to be travel that does that, but for me, that's what helps. And yeah, I think when I lost my friend, incredible woman, and she was able to say to me at the end what she thought mattered, and a lot of it was about being grateful and intentional about life. It's really helped me to focus on it, and interestingly, I think having had this new string to my bow, where I work for Home Exchange, a big home swapping company. I run my own travel coaching. I'm still working as a GP 3 days a week, and they're quite long, hard days, but I'm loving it in a new way again. I'm feeling regenerated and refreshed by it, because I've got other things that my brain goes to have a rest almost.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Rebecca. I think, yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. But I think, I never try to summarize people's pain or grief just because it's so personal, and and I say this not to compare anything, but I certainly appreciate the how we interpret sort of life situations, so that we can, I don't know, you just get this reflection and moments when you decide that based on this happening to me, this is how I'm going to move forward. This is the idea of post-traumatic like growth, and deciding what you're going to take from the experiences.
Yeah, well, we're all a product
Mm,
of what life
yeah,
has shown us and taught us. And
definitely.
I love the kind of community that comes when I sort of have a group of parents. I do like a group coaching thing, and everybody feeds off each other really more than me, and they all talk about the things they worry about, and a lot of it's about what other people have said to them. Are you
Right.
going to take the children there? You must be crazy. What happens if they get ill, and aren't you going to put them at risk? And those sorts of fears and anxieties that all of us hear and feel all the time. But when you surround yourself by groups of like-minded people, like anything we go through in life, any sort of trauma, I think, I've listened to some of your podcasts before, and Alex, you talked a bit about the community that you built up in those days when you were in NICU or ICU, whatever.
Yeah.
You build these like strong friendships and this shared understanding. And I think surrounding yourself, if you want to do more adventurous traveling with children, surrounding yourself by people who have normalized it, who see it as being part of daily narrative, does really help. And I still have days now, 2 years later, where I really, really struggle, having lost my friend. And, there's still definitely a bit of anxiety around my son's leg, although it's essentially fine. But it hangs over you a bit, doesn't it, when something like
Yeah.
that happens? But I'd say both events have definitely opened my eyes more to the precious life that we have, the limited time. That's the only thing we can never ever buy, isn't it? We can never buy more time. So we've got to kind of work out what we want and then make it happen. And there is nothing that's impossible to do in terms of travel with children. It's all valid. It's all going to be if it's what you want, you can make it happen.
Also, I think people have opinions about absolutely everything you do with your children. And a lot of the people saying, are you going to take children there? Are you crazy? They wouldn't travel there without children. So, because it's just not their thing, or they don't like travel or
Yeah.
whatever. And I think, yeah, there's definitely something to be said for kind of pushing away that kind of
Yeah,
commentary, that outside commentary on what you're doing, because you probably wouldn't want to do what they do for their
yeah.
holidays. You wouldn't enjoy maybe the type of travel that they do. Why does their opinion matter? But it is a hard thing to kind of push away. And I think it's
I love
something.
baby clinics. I do a lot of baby clinics, and
Okay.
and having now kind of successfully raised 3 children, well, they're still alive anyway. I think people will often come into baby clinic and they'll say, I'm really confused as to what to do. The baby might have colic, or it might have this, or my mother-in-law said this, and my sister said this, and my neighbor told me this, and a lady in the supermarket told me this, and what do you think I should do? And I spend a lot of time just saying to parents, like, well, there's 5 million different ways to raise a baby. There's a great book actually about it where they compare people raising kids in Brazil and the Eskimos and in China, and all the different ways that human beings have raised babies is like dramatically different. So for us to all assume that we can do it all in one way when we're all so different and our babies aren't robots and they don't come with instructions, for me, it's so I just spend a lot of time in baby clinics saying to mums, you ask 100 people, you get 100 different opinions. You're this baby's parent. You just do whatever feels right for you. It's about survival,
Mhm.
as long as you keep them safe, it really doesn't matter how you do it. And I think travel's the same. There's no one rule fits all. Some people like to do it one way, other people like to do it another, and it evolves. It evolves as your children change and as life throws different things your way. I mean, we're always looking at budget because that's for us the thing. We've got a very old, crumbly 900-year-old farmhouse that's constantly taking any spare pennies. So we never have a budget like, oh, we've saved up, £10,000 to go traveling for 3 months. It's always on a wing and a prayer, and looking for ways to find cheap flights and then to save money while you're on the road. That's what makes me tick, because that's where my experience comes from. I'm not saying I couldn't help a family who had got a really good budget, but I just think it's easier when you can throw a bit of money at the situation, not always as authentic as it turns out. Sometimes not having much cash is a great way to have a really, really real experience.
I'm nodding, but I'm like, no, but I do get that, because I think I don't know, like, it's just the I think for a lot of people the money thing is important, obviously, especially when you have children, right? You're always thinking about, it's already quite expensive. So I think sadly for some people, they think traveling, they think money. But you're right in terms of, budget ways in which you can make it happen. I mean, even for me, my traveling with the kids is always, it's always budget friendly. I plan things in advance. I'm good at, looking at comparison websites, and obviously budgeting, balancing kind of location and price and rating, and it's just finding that fine balance, isn't it? But I definitely agree that you don't have to spend a lot to have an amazing time.
Yeah, the home swapping is really great.
Yeah.
I mean, I would
Oh,
say that
cool.
now I work for them, but I've used it for a decade, where you just don't have to simultaneously swap your house, but you let people sleep in your house and feed your pets and water your plants, perhaps while you go camping. And then you save up these guest points. And then when you want to go anywhere, you can contact people in advance. And with young kids, going to a home, say for example you want to go and visit family in New Zealand, or go somewhere in Australia, a long way away, you don't want to carry loads of stuff with you, but you swap with a family in Australia, or you ask to use their home and they've already got high chairs and they've got like push chairs. They sometimes even allow you to sort of use their car, but it's more about the home having all the toys and all the baby plastic stuff, and the spoons that you need. And so I mean that's been a big thing for us. So when we went to Indonesia, we spent sort of 8 weeks backpacking, really, really basic. I mean, the accommodation was less than £5 a night for the 5 of us. We did voluntary work where we helped with research for some orangutans, and we lived with a tribe where we were just sleeping on wooden planks above some pigs. And then in Bali, we lived like kings, because we had 6 different home swaps where people let us stay in their incredible villas with often like pools and and that was all free, because we'd allowed people to stay in our house, which we need to, because otherwise our cats would go really hungry. So yeah, there's lots of sharing economy stuff. There's lots of really, it's not actually about the money. It's about the mindset. It's about determination, and it's about deciding that despite it being difficult and people telling you that it's not possible, it is possible if you put your mind to it. Yeah. And
I feel like,
with my group, I was just going to say, like, that's the one thing I'd really recommend is, if you decide you want to do it, surround yourself by other people who are the same way of thinking, because it helps just give you confidence, make you think you're not losing the plot. And
like shut out some of that noise from other people.
Or you are losing the plot, but that's okay too. I mean, I think
On your
sanity
own,
is a bit
losing the
boring. Exactly. No, but I think, and I think overall, it's what you said about what it builds in children. I'd love to kind of talk about that a bit, because I think the benefits for children, especially even with my 2 and 4-year-old, we previously went to Krakow, like 3 weeks ago. It was just so incredible, I think for them, hearing different languages, trying different foods, meeting. I mean, there was a couple of children that they met and were talking to, and it's just a novelty. And I think it's this idea of that novelty. I think is really good for children, but also what it means for them in terms of diversity, thinking differently, seeing the world as a opportunity in the world rather than being afraid. I'd love to hear how it sort of shaped your children, because I know there's a funny story about how your son handled the passport issues, which I think it's incredible for a 16-year-old to, be not so too afraid of it.
Yeah, well, I am actually about to finish writing a book, which is essentially a collection of cock-ups or comedy errors or how not to travel with children. So I've certainly got plenty of stories about when things go wrong. And I think that for me is the number one thing that travel helps children to realize.
Okay.
Like, firstly, the world is full of beautiful, kind, loving people that want you to see where they live in the best light and want to welcome you and are delighted that you've gone to where they live. And when you travel with young children, they're literally rolling out the red carpet in most of the world, especially if you've got a baby. You know, people just love that you would want to bring a baby to where they are, and they're interested and helpful. And, you know, we're led to believe that the world is full of people that are out to get us and con us, and it's scary. And, you know, the way the media portrays the world, it really gets into our heads and fills us with fear. And I think, you know, the cynical part of me thinks that that's probably how we're controlled the best, really, when we live in fear. But when you get out there and you find the world, you think, well, no, it's not like that at all. Everybody's just lovely. And for the children to gain the confidence to be able to see you interacting with total strangers, you know, when you don't know what to do and you don't know where you are and you don't know what time things are happening, you know, when there's complete lack of language. You know, unfortunately, the world's getting so easy to travel now. We've got Google Translate, we've got TripAdvisor, we've got, you know, everything on our. It's actually really hard to find challenge, but I try and go places where it's still quite tricky and we could still get in a pickle, because I just love the way that the children navigate that and think of solutions to the problems. And my oldest recently went to Portugal, so he had his 16th birthday and he flew the following day or the day after to see his friend in Portugal. And I hadn't read particularly carefully what the rules were, but I was allowed to buy an EasyJet flight for him, so I assumed that would be fine.
And it's just Portugal.
And as it turns out, it is fine. But the guy who was on the passport control that night, and it was midnight, didn't know that it was fine for a 16-year-old to come into the country unaccompanied, and wanted me to write an email explaining all of this, and that there was someone to pick him up at the other end, and that he wasn't going to be on his own. And, you know, I get it, because I think obviously we've got to be really careful about children traveling the world. But my son, bless him, was just really unfazed by the situation. He spent so long with us having perhaps not done the visa correctly or not having read the instructions properly, or that he just kind of stood there and waited for them, and then, you know, rang me. And so I was really proud, because I thought, you know, it's the lessons really come from when things don't go to plan as much as when they do. You know, we spent hours playing cards, waiting for trains that we've missed and buses that we've got the wrong day of, or and I think that's part of the adventure, isn't it? That's just a good way to look at life, really. We don't know what's coming around the corner, but we have to roll with the punches. And you know, raising children, I think for most of us, it's absolutely petrifying when we wake up one day with a baby and we think, I'm not only responsible for my own happiness, but for the happiness of this child. And you know, what if I get it wrong, and what if things don't go to plan? But obviously, you know, children don't go to plan, and they make their own choices and decisions, and all we can do is run alongside them for a bit and guide them as best we can. And if we never put ourselves in any situations that are testing or in the face of any adversity, then the opportunities to show them how to deal with that inevitability are lost. So I think it's good.
I think you bounce back from that sort of thing as a young person as well. I mean, when we talked about this last time, I thought this and didn't say it. I once, at about the same age, I was just 17, travelled to France, not on my own passport, on my sister's passport, and she is 12 years younger than me. So I was 17 and she was like a 5-year-old. And I was going with a group of other young people on a coach, and it came about a week or so beforehand. I sent away to get my provisional driving licence, and didn't think, I sent my passport away to get it, didn't think, I'm going on holiday quite soon. And we tried to phone the DVLA in Swansea and like beg them to send my passport back. And they're like, no, once it's in the system, it's in the system. The postman was looking out for the passport. Like he was going to come early with it. It didn't come back. So I decided that I would just take my sister's passport because it was in the days where they didn't even get you off the bus.
Yeah,
Like they
I
would
love
just get
that.
on. I'd been, away on a couple of trips like this before. That time they did get on the bus and they said, get your passports open to the picture page. And I just sat holding it as far away from them as I could as they came down the bus, glimpsed everyone's passport. And actually, so we didn't get together for years after this, but my husband was like a few seats behind on this bus going, who is this crazy woman? Because the rumour had like spread around the bus that I was travelling on someone else's passport, which travelling without a passport, not illegal. Travelling on someone else's, illegal. On the way back, they just got on and said, are you all British? And we went, aye. And they just waved us through. So it was very lucky, but I took that completely in my stride. I was just like, nah, it's fine. I still want to go.
That is why I'm doing my mission with you. Exactly that thing, that quality there.
I like it. Never let the small thing like a passport get in the way.
Hold you back.
I was like, I'm not going. I'm going on this trip.
That is,
we lost all 5 passports last year. This time last year, we went to Sri Lanka, and we got to a posh hotel. We'd been staying in loads of kind of more budget places for weeks. And then we got to this one place, they asked for our passports. And we sort of casually for the first couple of hours thought, oh, we'll just empty our bags. They'll be somewhere.
They'll be there.
The bag. And then it just started to get more and more like worrying because they just clearly weren't there. And then we were thinking back to when we'd last had them. And it was weeks before that we remembered having had them. And we spent a whole afternoon Googling. We were leaving Sri Lanka in a week and we had to go via India. And India is one of the only places in the world you can't travel on a pretend, temporary passport. So we were going to have to change our flights. We were going to have to get new passports issued. It's going to take a long time and it was going to cost thousands of pounds. So we were sat in our rooms like this. And then my one of my children just suddenly remembered that in one of the places we'd stayed, and like 4 places back, he'd put them in a drawer to keep them safe because he thought it would be a good thing, which it was, and we rang that hotel and they were still in the drawer. So we did an 8-hour detour drive on the way to the airport to pick them up and everything was absolutely fine. And we were very relieved. But I love that one of my kids had the forethought to store them safely rather than leave them on the bed. And I love that that we found a sort of it was almost better than having never lost them, the feeling that we had from realizing that they were safe.
Yeah, you're suddenly thousands of pounds better off.
We went to the bar, we had a brilliant night.
Funny.
I just love that. I think it's and I think it's so what you said there is about that thing it builds into children, this ability to deal with life, to deal with things you haven't planned, to deal with the unexpected, to deal with bad situations, even when you don't have a plan. I think that is it really. And I wonder how sort of people can build it, can expose their children to that, even outside of traveling. For example, I recently started Scouts with my son, and we went camping, and even the way like they had their lunch on the field, they sort of throw the sandwiches at them. People give you an apple; it's not cut and peeled. And I thought, wow, I was so glad for him to have that at 4, because I thought if he was in the house, the grandparents, they'd cut it, they'd peel it, they'd wash it, they'd give it to him, they'd wipe his mouth. And it's this idea of allowing children to kind of experience life in an imperfect way. I really think that's such a great quality.
I do too. And you don't necessarily, you can build educational into every activity you do with the children. You can make, if you've got the presence of mind as a mother to go to Tesco's or any other supermarket and make it into a really rich learning environment, then of course you can. As I said at the beginning, it's just, for me, the place where I'm at my best is when I'm on the road and overseas. But we had a situation once on an island that we got stuck on where there was no food, and the children at the time would have been 3, 7 and 12 or something like that. And you know what kids are like at that age? I'm hungry. And so we spent probably...
We sure do.
48 hours of like, well, I'm really sorry, but there isn't any food. And then it gets to the point where they stop even saying that they're hungry because they're probably in sort of ketosis, and we just were getting on with life, and everybody was thinking, oh my goodness, I really hope there's some food on this island soon. We were stuck on it and we couldn't get off it. And then I remember we were all playing in the sea. It was like beautiful crystal clear water, and there were like fish, and one of the boys looked up and there was a man walking along the beach holding a chicken upside down by its legs, which they'd obviously found and killed, and we were going to have chicken that night. And the kids were like, oh my goodness, they were like so excited. And one of them has been vegetarian for years and years, so even he was excited. And then we started talking about how we were going to have this chicken. Anyway, by the evening, I mean, it was shared out between a lot of people. And the boys all got given chicken legs, so they were just the kind of funny pearlescent sort of skin on the chicken legs to nibble on, which I thought there's no way in a month of Sundays to eat those. But sure enough, they all got right stuck in. They were pulling every last bit of skin off these chicken legs. Not the meaty bit of the chicken leg, just the actual feet. And apparently you can eat quite a bit of chicken feet. I think they do in places of the world. But you know, when kids are hungry, and they have been more hungry than normal while we've been on the road, you know, I don't want to eat that. Fine. Well, that's what we've got. And if you can't eat that, then, you know, but I'm not advocating letting children go hungry, and I'm not advocating bad parenting, but I just happen to essentially fall into that quite frequently. And I do think that there are things that come out of it, and that they still talk about now, you know, the best stories they have about when they had to eat grubs. And that was just out of a sheer desire not to be rude. When we arrived in a sort of tribal village in Sumatra, and they served us up these big kind of saggy grub things. They're like you know, about the size of a conker, but white and squidgy, and they come out of a tree, and they're a delight for the people there. It was a real honor to be given them. So we weren't going to turn them down, and we popped them in and enjoyed them. And, you know, for me, that was a very proud moment, because I could see the kids were thinking, you know, what if my friends could see me now? This is totally disgusting. But again, when you're slightly hungry and you don't want to let people down, and you want to be like culturally sensitive, it's amazing what you do, really.
Yeah, I mean, on a much lesser extent, I think that generally travel does bring that idea that there isn't one right way to do things. And that is what I'm keen to get out of it for my son. And it's one of those things that I lived in Barcelona for a year when I was 20. And just, I mean, that culture's not even that much different. But just the fact that maybe going out later in the evening is a thing that people do. That you know, you might have the shops all be shut for a bit in the afternoon. All of those kind of things that are different to how we do things in the UK. Like you were saying, Tiffany, about being at the Scouts. It's exposing them to doing things differently and not being really rigid in, well, no, this is the way we do it. And when we were talking before about people judging parenting and having all of those ideas, you know, if you look at how people parent around the world, I was really stuck on the idea of not letting my child sleep in my bed because I've been told how terrible and dangerous that was, and blah, blah, blah. That did not last for very long, because the only place he was going to sleep was my bed. And then we bed shared for like 2.5 years. But I think that idea of doing things differently is what you get out of travel, because if you go to other countries, cots aren't a thing. You know, that's a very, very westernized way of how you bring up a baby and where they sleep. So, yeah, for me, it's all about the difference and, just realizing we're not right about everything.
And you just gain that confidence that's so important in parenting, for being allowed to do whatever feels right for you. And that comes a lot with travel, because you do see how people get on with it, and in really remote rural parts of the world where they don't have as much capitalism and commercial, you know, they really share parenting a lot more openly. The children are allowed to run free often, and then, you know, any mother who sees any child in any predicament will help them. It's like a communal thing, which I think we could really gain a lot from. We really isolate ourselves in parenthood in the UK sometimes, even more so than in Europe. But I'm about to take my kids to Europe again now in a few days' time, and I know that we're all going to struggle, particularly me, with the crisps, because I love crisps. And I never find the crisps are as good. But we're going to Greece, so I'm really looking forward to all that nice,
Oh, that's
fresh,
nice.
Lovely.
fresh, like pitters that have been, like we don't need crisps, do we? Because we can have all the other lovely things that they have.
Do some nice ready salted ones, though. They're
Brilliant,
just always ready salted.
Honestly.
That's one thing they all think we're mad for, though. Like, why do you need so many flavours of crisp? What on earth is wrong with you, English people? Why? And that's something I'd never reflected on till I sort of spent extended periods elsewhere. I was like, oh, why do we have like every single flavour of crisp under the sun? It's unnecessary.
Yeah, don't tell them they can stop, because that's one of the best things about living in the UK, I would say. The crisps, but I not just the food, not just the kind of interactions with other children and seeing other ways of life and sort of navigating problems, but it's just that kind of step off, that kind of change of pace that comes. And people around the world are often just, it always strikes me as weird when I first go traveling anywhere, the amount of people that are just sort of sat playing chess, sat on a street corner, women sat doing their laundry together. People just sit and think and let the world go by a lot more. You never see anyone in the UK really just sitting, doing nothing.
Wow.
So I like that. I like that, the way it helps us reflect on our own lives. It helps us look at the way other people do things. Everything seems to slow down. You can go away for 3 weeks and you can come back and feel totally different about life, and everybody else is just carrying on. They're like, oh, you've been away. Oh, and that can happen even if you go for a whole year, actually. Life just carries on without you, and you gain so much richness, and time seems to go slower somehow.
Wow, you're amazing, Rebecca. Thank you so much for, I think, reminding me like this is definitely what I want, and I will continue to do.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I'm very honoured to be on your show, and big up to all the mamas out there and the dads, obviously, too.
Definitely.
Thank you so much. It's been great chatting with you.
Yeah. Where can people find you online?
So I've got a website, which is www.rebeccaryell.com. That's my name, Ryell. And I'm Rebecca_Ryell_travel on Instagram. And I'm on LinkedIn. And I've got a book coming out, hopefully in the next year, which will just be amusing tales of how not to do it, and tips that I've learned the hard way about how to travel with children.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll send you a signed copy, guys.
Oh, yes.
Please. Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and share any episodes you might have enjoyed with your friends. There we go. Pro podcaster there.
Thanks, guys. See you on the next one.
Bye.